So center pull brakes and down tube shifters in 2019. What is the best path to upgrading your bike so it's more supple? And what are our biggest challenges growing the YouTube channel? Lots of interesting questions in this week's Q&A. And again, if I answer your question, be sure to email us at pathlesspelled@gmail.com with your address, and we will send you a sticker pack. So I really appreciate all the folks that submit interesting and thoughtful questions. First question is by Scrooge1913. What makes you a Retrogrouch, and what would a Retrogrouch build look like for you? So what makes me a Retrogrouch is that I tend to actually prefer older gear. I'd be perfectly content with a 9-speed drivetrain and friction shifters. While I appreciate hydraulic brakes, I can live with cable actuated brakes, and I can also still see the benefit of rim brakes. So a Retrogrouch build for me would be something a lot like the Northern Lion bike I reviewed last week. So 650B, wide range double, down tube shifters, and rim brakes. That's kind of the quintessential Retrogrouch build. And talking about that video, there were lots of questions. A bunch of people asked about how the center pull brakes worked. I have to say, when I hopped on the bike, I was really skeptical about their effectiveness. But surprisingly, with the time I had with the bike, the brakes stopped the bike really, really well. I would say they stopped the bike better than any cantilever brakes I've ever used, and they were about par with V-brakes, with the advantage of not having to put the pads so closely to the rim. Again, I didn't get to try it in the wet, so there is that aspect of it I didn't get to really review, but in dry conditions, set up perfectly, a lot of braking power. So related question one, Ceballos asks, are hydraulic disc brakes worth the upgrade coming from mechanical disc brakes? That's kind of a complicated question because it depends on what you prioritize most. If you want the absolute best stopping power and experience, then yes, they are definitely worth the upgrade. For example, I've ridden many gravel style bikes, and bikes with the hydraulic brakes, I can get all the stopping power I need from the top of the hoods. But with cable actuated brakes, I do have to go into the drops for that added leverage. That said, it's not cut and dry. When Laura sat down with Ira, they had a big discussion about component choice, about hydraulic or cable. And ultimately, she's going to go with a cable actuated disc brake just because we plan to travel with the bike a lot. So that means kind of taking off the handlebars, and we don't want to worry about about potentially kinking a hydraulic line or it breaking in transit. So if you are going to travel with your bike a lot, have to shove it into a case, or you're going to take it to remote areas, then I think those are instances when a cable actuated disc brake would actually be better than a hydraulic. So Roy Castillo asks, is a 650B wheel adequate enough for road use? Plan to get mid-high end rims for road and light gravel. And I would say yes. You guys know the advantages. It'll let you take a wider tire, and if you get a good high performance 650B tire, I don't think you're really going to lose all that much in terms of speed, but you're going to gain a ton in comfort and ability to go off-road. JP Fasano asks, tire pressure. When riding, why do you change tire pressure, and how do you go about doing it? So a lot of people are different. Some people just want to set it and forget it. I like to fine tune the tire pressure, especially on a longer ride when there are really distinct riding sections. So for example, if I'm going on a long paved stretch, I'll run the tire pressure a little bit higher. If it's a 650B by 47 millimeter tire, then I'm seeing pressures around 35 to 40 PSI. That's even a little too hard for me. And when we hit a rocky section or a real gravelly section, I will drop the tires to as low as 25 PSI, sometimes lower in the front. Generally, my magic numbers are 30 in the rear and 25 in the front on kind of middle to average gravel. How do I go about doing it? A pump, obviously. Monitoring the air pressure, I really like the AccuGauge analog pump, doesn't need batteries. A little bit on the big and heavier side. They've got a model that goes up to 60 PSI, and that really lets you fine tune those sub 60 PSI increments. Scott Cran asks, any suggestions for a commute bike that can keep up on fast group rides? Thinking 650B by 38, fenders 6 months of the year, and a small rack for lunch and a change of clothes. So 650B by 38, not a real common size. So I'm going to make suggestions in the more typical 650B by 47, which I think will have no problems keeping up on fast group rides. If your budget is $3K and under, then you've got lots of options. I would steer you towards the Midnight Special. That's got all the fitments for fenders and that'll give you $1,000 wiggle room, and you can upgrade the wheel set to a lighter carbon wheel set if that's your jam. At under $3K, you can also get into a full carbon warbird Tiagra, even a carbon war road. Again, those have eyelets now for fenders and even rack. If you want to go with a steel option, the Otso Warrican, stainless steel, carbon fork, nice and tucked, but also has eyelets for fenders, and I believe that is about $2,500. And also, a big fan of the Kona Rove NRB DL that we reviewed last year. Aluminum frame, carbon fork, has eyelets for fenders, and I think that you can probably get it on sale for under $2K, and again, upgrade the wheel set. So lots of flexibility in that sub $3K range. Right, so now we've got a string of questions all related to tires, so I'm gonna group them together. Dane Johnson asks, what's the biggest benefit to converting to tubeless tires? So the biggest benefit that I see personally, flat protection is an aspect of it, but I actually think the ability to run lower pressures without worrying about a pinch flat. Because if you're taking your gravel bike on really rocky terrain where there's baby heads and everything, and you accidentally hit a rock, tubeless will help prevent pinch flats. I mean, you're not invincible. You can still shred the sidewall or get a deep gash. Ryan Simmons asked, short of buying a whole new bike, what are the key areas to target if you want to simplify my current bike? Is it just about the tires? Think about those who have a basic mountain or hybrid bike, like a $300 budget, but also desire to enjoy some gravel, adventure, and bike packing. I think you hit the nail on the head. Tires, I think, are the single most noticeable upgrade you can make on your bike. If you have a limited budget and want to really simplify your bike, then definitely go the tire route. In terms of tire recommendations, with $300, you can go with Reneer's tires, which are the king of suppleness. Lots of new tread patterns. Other tires I like are the Soma Cazaderos. I have a video review on that. The Specialized Pathfinder Pros. Terravale tires. I've not spoken about them too much, but I've been riding with the Coronados on the Jones bike, super supple, and the Rampart tires on the Velo Orange. Of course, WTB. WTB makes a whole range of supple tires now, from their Horizons to the Byways to the Resolutes, all that good stuff. And if you're still on the super budget and those are too much, I would look at the tried and true Panaracer Pacella. Don't get the one with all the beefy flat protection, but just the supple sidewall, and you can enjoy the supple life on the cheap. So Stephen Murphy asks, cycling apps, why someone might use them, which ones are good, which ones are worth buying and subscribing to. I'm going to make a whole separate video on this, but really quickly, I do like apps like Ride with GPS and also the website. It's great for recording rides, sharing rides, and also discovering rides. If you've not been, you should check it out. See who is riding gravel in your area. They've got this really cool ambassador program, which highlights the best of the best riding in certain regions. And to my knowledge, I think they do the best job at that compared to Strava or Komoot. If your riding is going to take you on a lot of single track, then definitely Trailforks is a must-have app. Also an app like Gaia, which lets you access different topo maps. So if you're going in super rugged backcountry riding, you're gonna have those maps on your phone and not need cell service. Okay, so Cole Mum asked, what is the furthest you would commute on bike? Prior to Path Less Pedaled, I was a photographer in Long Beach, and I had a big cargo bike, and I would bike to all my shoots. And my personal radius back then was 25 miles. I would do jobs if they were 25 miles or less in one direction. Overall, it was crazy to think, but back in those days, sometimes I would ride 50 miles a day doing a shoot and coming back home with like 100 pounds of camera gear. Bonkers. Jeff Page asks, what's your long-term opinion of the Jones bars? Are they the bee's knees? So I'm still digging the Jones bars on the Jones bike. I've since removed them off the Mariachi. I don't think it works well with the geometry for me personally, but set up as Jeff Jones would prefer you to on this bike. They're great. I like them for really rough riding. They are really upright. They're fun. They make the bike feel like a lively little cruiser. I probably wouldn't use them if I was going on a ride with lots of long straightaways and I had to really tuck in out of the headwind, just because they're a little bit tougher to get in an aero position. But for shorter rides, let's say sub 30 miles, perfect. Sandro Chiavro asked, do you keep trying to improve your fitness for longer ride goals? I know you guys train for DK. Where's your commitment towards that now? Thanks. Well, snow has finally melted, so we're finally able to ride outside once again. So we are doing more daily rides. We're actually following a similar I guess, training pattern, for lack of better words, that we use when we were training for Dirty Kansas. So a number of shorter rides during the week and longer rides on the weekend. In terms of our commitment for Dirty Kansas, you know, 200 miles is a long ride. We've got some plans to do events this year, but they're all going to be 100 miles or less. I mean, 200 miles for us, it's just not fun. It's a slog, you know, great for people that enjoy that love doing that. I think 100 miles is plenty long, and you can do that and not be completely trashed at the end of the day. So that is what I think our personal limit is in terms of kind of doing event rides. I think in 2 weekends from now, we're actually gonna go out to Sandpoint, Idaho. There is a gravel race. We're gonna do the short option and not race it, but just kind of enjoy riding with other folks. Yeah, so I think we're gonna be perfectly okay with doing events 100 miles or less. Again, it's enough to be a challenge, but you're not completely like destroyed or have to like reshape your entire riding life to train for. Matthew Langston asks, what has been the most challenging aspect regarding this channel? Shooting video, brainstorming ideas for videos, DK18, convincing brands to send you bikes, etc. Keep up the great work. So the biggest challenges for me specifically actually isn't ideas. I have a ton of ideas. I've got my trusty notebook here and my fountain pen, and I've literally got pages of video ideas. So the ideas part for me really isn't the challenging part. I think the hardest part is kind of like the emotional aspect of being a YouTuber, for lack of better terms. I put in, you know, a lot of work to make quality content the best as I can, and in doing that, the negative comments still really, you know, bother me. I know a lot of you say just ignore the comments, blah blah blah, but you know, I mean, as a creator, as a human being, it's hard to ignore. So generally, keeping the positivity and the will to create the videos despite you know, people crapping on the channel or leaving dumb comments, that's a big challenge. The other big challenge is making this financially sustainable. Because this may surprise you guys, but as it is, if I were just to take AdSense alone, if you worked at McDonald's, you'd be making way more money than I would be doing this YouTube channel. So figuring out ways to kind of supplement that, either selling patches or, you know, starting up the Patreon and PayPal, those are huge things that go into making this channel sustainable. For us, doing things like Sea Otter, you know, Sea Otter, you know, we paid out of pocket the flights, the hotel, the food. So we actually lost money on that trip, but I think in terms of viewership, you guys really enjoyed it. We got a spike in traffic, picked up, you know, a handful of subscribers. I mean, just to be upfront, the primary reason I'm able to devote this much time to the YouTube channel is because Laura's working at Adventure Cycling. It's kind of stabilized our income, but has given me the flexibility and freedom, wiggle room to kind of develop the voice of the channel and put all my efforts into this. In terms of convincing brands to send bikes, that is still definitely a challenge. You know, we don't race on this channel, and I think brands are always kind of skeptical if you're not on a team or, you know, pinning on the number. I think, you know, you guys dig the channel, but in the grand scheme of things, we're still fairly small. So there's still a lot of like proving to people that it's worthwhile to send us things to talk about. I mean, I had a weird interaction with one brand recently. You know, they make this bike that I'm super stoked on, but their response to me was, well, I don't know how you're gonna top, you know, this review by X on this site, as if it was like some competition. Like I was supposed to bring more views or attention to their brand. It was a weird response. You know, for me, like, I just want to review things that are interesting, that you guys will enjoy. Whether you guys buy it or not, you know, it's up to you. I think there's value in it. You know, we get a fair amount of views on the channel now. And in terms of covering these types of bikes in this way, there's very few people doing that. So I think it brings value, but it still takes some convincing to larger brands or boutique brands. So there's that. All right, so final question, no less important than others. I actually really like this question because no one really asked this. Oscar Ramirez asks, what's it like to be a person of color making bike content on YouTube? And I have to say, it's kind of lonely. I mean, if you think of all the big bike YouTube channels out there, how many people of color do you see? You know, it's not GCN, not Pink Bike, not Bike Radar. I enjoy all those YouTube channels, don't get me wrong. but it is kind of a lonely space. Specifically, as a person of color, Filipino heritage, actually born in the Philippines, immigrated here when I was younger, I do have to deal with the occasional racist comment. So there's that. At the same time, it can also be extremely rewarding. I've gotten messages, emails from folks, telling me that, it's great to see, another brown person on the bike on the internet that has such a visible presence, because it inspires them to keep doing what they're doing. And I can actually strongly relate to this. Like when I got into bike touring, it was 10 years ago, social media wasn't a thing. And I feel like if I were bike curious then, and if all I saw were, white dudes in jorts, it probably wouldn't resonate with me. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but just saying I wouldn't see myself in this bike touring space at all. So it is a lonely space. It can be rewarding. There are some other bike YouTubers of color. There's that I enjoy. There's Zach Gallardo. He focuses mostly on fixed gear bikes. There's the guy at Locked In. Sorry, I forgot your name. Also initially focused on fixed gear bikes, but is doing more gravel stuff. There's Manual Pedal, although he doesn't upload with a lot of consistency. There's Aisha McGowan, who again hasn't gone all in on the YouTube, and her stuff is more race focused, so not necessarily my same genre. I don't talk about it a lot, but I do feel like I have to represent, just so if there's other viewers like me that are bike curious, don't see themselves as racing, aren't represented in major bike mainstream bike media, that they can at least see someone else doing the kind of riding that they want to do is maybe moderately successful, and it will get them on the bike or keep them on the bike. One thing I've learned from all this YouTube stuff is that we can have a common interest, but completely different belief. So to say things like just ride or we're all on two wheels is kind of reductive and doesn't really address the complexity of the human experience. I will say, in terms of working with brands as a bike YouTuber and a person of color, I feel like it's a little bit more of a challenge. I'm not the typical tall, skinny, white racer dude that's viewed as an expert in the bike space. I'm short, I'm brown, so I feel like it's a little bit tougher for me to convince brands to work with the channel in some ways. I definitely got this sense at Sea Otter. I mean, there were some brands that clearly knew who we were, what we were about. But then there were others that were like, who's this short brown person with a microphone? Since I'm not the typical cycling media persona, so to speak, definitely a challenge, but keep pressing on. Oscar, thanks for that question. It's a tricky subject to talk about, but important to me. On that note, thanks for watching this Q&A. If you guys have any other questions that you want answered in the next session, leave those in the comments below. And if I answered your question, don't forget to email us at pathlesspelled@gmail.com, and I will send you stickers. And of course, until next time, keep the supple side down.